Hey guys, welcome back to the third and the final session on Henry Fayol. If you have not watched the first two sessions, I would highly recommend you to do that first. Links for the same would be in the description of this video. So moving on with our miscellaneous terms as suggested by Henry Fayol. The first is his need for administrative training. He propagated an idea which was the need for administrative training. So what he meant by this is, Fayol is also a pioneer in suggesting the need for systematic training in administration. He criticizes civil engineering colleges in France. So whatever civil engineering colleges were there in France, he criticized them for excluding administration from their syllabus. He criticizes civil engineering colleges in France for excluding administration from their syllabi. Fayol suggests that training is a continuous process starting from the school and covering in-service training of the employees within an organization. So he believes that even in school, students should be given the training of administration. He believes that training is a continuous process starting from school and till the point that an employee gets employed in an organization. He further says that he considers every superior officer in an organization as a teacher to his immediate subordinates. So every manager, every superior officer and every supervisor should behave as a teacher to his new and upcoming subordinates. There is a quote by Henry Fayol. He says that everyone needs some concepts of administration. There should be some generalized teaching of administration, elementary in primary schools, somewhat wider in post-primary schools, and quite advanced in higher social educational establishments. So as you can see, Taylor believes that from the primary schools itself, students should be given some training of administration, because administration is universal and everyone needs to have some generalized teaching of administration at every level of their learning. This is what Fayol meant by need of administrative training. Moving on with our second miscellaneous concept, that is nothing but gangplank. We have already seen in our previous slides that Fayol suggested a scalar chain or a hierarchy. He said that there should be a top-down model, there should be a line of authority, there should be a hierarchy, but he at the same time said that in large government organizations this can be very difficult and very lengthy and very time consuming. So he gave an alternate route which was nothing but gangplank. So what gangplank is? Nothing but level jumping. In a hierarchical organization where there are many hierarchies, many levels, you can skip some levels, and what this means is, we'll see that first. For example, there is a message or file which has to be transferred from F to P. As you can see, from F to P, if you consider your proper channel of communication, what will happen is from F the file or message will go to E, then D, then C, B, A, L, M, N, O, P. So this is the scalar chain in an organization which has many levels. So from F to P, if something has to go, it has to go via all these organizations. What Fayol suggested is, you can use gangplank in such organizations which have so many levels intermediate and which will cause delay. Okay, so you can use gangplank. This is nothing but level jumping. Very simply, it means going of file from F directly to P. This is nothing but gangplank. It is a bridge. It is a bridge from F to P. As you can see, it is however possible for F to use gangplank and avoid going through A. A is the top of the organization and F can avoid going through A and all the other intervening layers as intermediaries by using gangplank. Recourse to gangplank is however possible only when the immediate supervisors authorize such a relationship. In this case, E and O. E is the immediate supervisor of F and O is the immediate supervisor of P. If the immediate supervisors allow such a relationship, only then gangplank can be used. A very simple example of gangplank would be, let's say there are two departments in an organization. One is welfare department, one is finance department. So if welfare department wants some quote of money from finance department, so that request will go from all the levels and head of the organization to again finance department. But all these levels can be skipped. What Fayol says that if there are many levels in organization and if the immediate supervisor allows this, one person from welfare department can directly contact another person from finance department and ask for the quote of a particular welfare program or a particular welfare scheme. This is an example of gangplank. Although, as you can see, although Fayol places emphasis on formal organization, he says that there should be hierarchy, there should be scalar chain. He places emphasis on formal organization. So although Fayol places emphasis on formal organization, he is alive to the dangers of conformity to hierarchy and formalism. It is an error to depart needlessly from the line of authority, but it is even greater one to keep it when detriment to the business ensues. What he says here is, you should always follow line of authority. You should always give importance to the formal structure of organization. It is an error to depart needlessly from this line of authority. Line of authority is important, but at the same time, having said that, it is even a greater error. It is even a greater error to follow the line of authority when there is detriment to the business, when it is causing delay, when it is causing losses. So this principle or this rule should be followed, but not to such an extent that the organization itself is doomed. So I hope you have got the basic idea of what Gangplank means. Fayol further says that whenever there is a disagreement develops between FNP, since FNP are now using Gangplank, they are directly communicating with each other. Let's say that a situation arises where there is a disagreement between FNP, they must turn the matter to their superiors. So Fayol had even visualized this situation where there was a disagreement between FNP. While suggesting Gangplank, Fayol is rather cautious. He feels that it may be less relevant to government agencies in which lines of authority are less clearer than in private organization. What Fayol says here is, in government agencies these lines of authority are less clearer. The scalar chain is not so much clear. So in such government agencies where lines of authorities are less clear, it is difficult that Gangplank can be used, because it can be used only when there are clear lines of authority, when there is clear hierarchy. Only then can the Gangplank be used. These are the ideas of Fayol on Gangplank. I hope you have understood the ideas of scalar chain and hierarchy and Gangplank now. So moving on with our session, we'll now compare F.W. Taylor and Henry Fayol. We'll first see the differences and then we'll see the similarities. So what are the differences between Taylor and Fayol? Taylor concentrated on the soft floor level. We have already seen this in our session on F.W. Taylor. He concentrated on soft floor level where the workers work, which was the field of production of the industries and factories where the workers worked. He concentrated more on the soft floor level. Fayol on the other hand concentrated more on the top level. As we have already seen, he gave us attributes of a good manager. He gave us 5 main elements of management, POCC if you remember. Please visit previous sessions on Henry Fayol if you have forgotten that. He concentrated more on the top level and Taylor concentrated more on the soft floor level. So what Taylor's theory is nothing but bottom up layer. He went from bottom to top. It is the bottom up theory. What Fayol's theory is, it is a top down theory. He came from managers level to the bottom level. He said that there should be centralization, there should be unity of command, there should be unity of direction. So he concentrated more on the top level and then he came down to the down level. Taylor's is a bottom up theory, Fayol's is a top down theory. He emphasized more on, Taylor emphasized more on efficiency of workers and managers, and Fayol emphasized more on functions of management as a whole and principles involved therein. This is very much self-explanatory. Taylor focused on the increasing productivity through work simplification and standardization. We have seen this in session of F.W. Taylor that he standardized the tools, he standardized the work process, and he told that there is one best way of achieving everything. So he focused on increasing productivity by work simplification and standardization. Fayol on the other hand focused more on improving the overall administration. He did not focus on standardization of tools, on finding one best way, on simplification of one work processes. He focused on improving the overall administration by observing certain principles. Taylor's theory is an empirical theory. What is empirical theory? Empirical means something that is based on scientific rules, scientific observations, scientific experiments. So that is nothing but empirical theory. If you remember, Taylor conducted some experiments on shoveling of coal, if you remember that. So his was a theory which was derived from scientific observations. So Taylor's was an empirical theory and Fayol's was an non-empirical theory. Now remember something, Fayol was also an engineer like Taylor, but his theory was non-empirical in nature. It was based on his own ideas, in his own personal experiences. His ideas are based on his own personal experiences, and that is why it is a non-empirical theory. It is not based on any scientific observation. Taylor, F.W. Taylor stressed on technical side of the work and Henry Fayol stressed on the administrative side of the work. Taylor's is a micro theory. He studied micro aspects of management of task. If you remember, time study, motion study of F.W. Taylor, they studied all the motions of humans involved in a particular work. So it is a micro theory. It went too much into detail and it studied micro aspects. So Taylor's theory is a micro theory, and Fayol on the other hand studied only the macro aspects, the outline, the overall principles. He gave us the overall rules and principles. So Fayol's is a macro theory. He studied management of total organization as a whole. And F.W. Taylor's was a relatively rigid approach, and Fayol himself said that my principles are flexible and they can be adapted according to the needs of time. F.W. Taylor advocated functional foremanship, if you remember, 8 specialized supervisors for each worker, and Fayol advocated unity of command, 1 supervisor per employee. Taylor suggested science of industrial management, and Fayol provided a systematic theory of management or administration, whatever side of controversy you are on. So he provided a theory of management and Taylor gave us a science of industrial management. So these are the differences between F.W. Taylor and Henry Fayol. Now we'll look at what are the similarities between Henry and Taylor. Both of them realized the universality of management. Both of them said that the management or administration is universal, it is same everywhere and can be applied in any type of organization. Both believed that managerial capabilities can be acquired through training. Both of them emphasized on good amount of training for the subordinates or employees. Both emphasized mutual cooperation. If you remember, Taylor also emphasized on mutual cooperation between employers and employees, management and workers for attainment of organizational goals. Both had a common objective of increasing the efficiency and economy of the organization. Both stressed on practical aspects. They both gave more focus on practicality of things rather than laying down simple theories. They both stressed on practical aspects. They did not lay down any principle which cannot be brought into parameters of practicality. Both believed in the concept of economic man and propagated rebel hypothesis. I have already dealt with this in F.W. Taylor session. Please go back and visit that. Both of them believed that humans can be motivated only by monetary factors and not by any social or psychological factors. Both of them propagated the idea of goal congruence. What this means is the integration of multiple goals within the organization and between multiple groups. As we have already seen, one of the 14 principles of Henry Fayol was subordination of individual interest for the larger interest or group interest, and Taylor also suggested the same thing, that there should be harmony between and cooperation between managers and workers. So goal congruence was the idea which is common to both, integration of multiple goals within the organization and also within the multiple groups. Congruence is a result of alignment of the goals to achieve an overarching mission. So there is an overarching mission. To achieve that, all the goals of individual, of the organization and various groups within the organization, every such goal should be integrated. These are some of the similarities of Taylor and Fayol. The last similarity is they both applied scientific methods to problems of the management. We'll see some of the criticisms of Henry Fayol. Fayolism is nothing but the theory of Henry Fayol of 14 principles of management is nothing but Fayolism. Like Taylor's theory is Taylorism, Fayol's theory is Fayolism. We'll see some of the criticisms of Henry Fayol now. So his first criticism is it is an unscientific theory. We have seen this in our comparison of Taylor and Fayol. It was a non-empirical theory. It is an unscientific theory. Fayol himself, being an engineer, came up with an unscientific theory or non-empirical theory. Second is it is a mechanistic theory. Now this is a very common running theme for Taylor also. It was suggested that it was a mechanistic theory because it neglected the human side of organization, and same thing for Henry Fayol also. It was a mechanistic theory. It is a dehumanizing theory. The same criticism as F.W. Taylor. It is a dehumanizing theory. The oversimplified human motivation concept, the economic man concept, tribal hypothesis concept, all of these things I have dealt with already in F.W. Taylor session of criticism. Please go back and watch that session of criticism. The concept is same. So the next criticism is it is a normative theory. What do you mean by normative theory? It lays down norms. It lays down some general principles and it says that you have to apply these general principles everywhere. So it lays down some norms. It is a normative theory. As opposed to dealing with the problems of organizations, it just gave us some norms and it just gave us some principles. So this is one of the criticisms, that it is a normative theory. Another criticism is that it is a static theory. It does not change with times. This is a criticism leveled by critics, that it is a static theory. It was made only for those times which Fayol lived in. Other criticisms also come from criticisms of later thinkers like Human Relations School, behavioralist Dwight Waldo of New Public Administration. So all these later thinkers have criticized. So if you have to say that Human Relations Schools have criticized, say that these critics felt that the human side of organizations was neglected. So this is the criticism of later thinkers. Now we'll deal with some of the specific criticisms. like Peter Drucker. We have already seen this in our FW Taylor session. UPSC has moved away from asking conventional and static questions, and they have come to unconventional questions, and they have already asked some of the specific criticisms of specific persons regarding FW Taylor. So to be on a safer side, it is important to study some of the very important criticisms that other people have leveled on Henry Fayol. So one of such important people was Peter Drucker. He came up with such criticisms. He says that it is a mechanistic model. What Fayol's model is, it is a mechanistic model of an ideal or universal organization, and it was imposed on a living business. It is a mechanistic model and it was imposed on a living business. Such an ideal or universal organization in reality cannot exist. This is what Peter Drucker says. He says that all the 14 principles of Fayol overlap. They are not distinct and they are overlapping in nature. This is the second criticism put forward by Peter Drucker. The third and the most important criticism by Peter Drucker is Fayol used narrow functional base. Now there is something known as functional base of classification of organization. Organizations are classified based on functions, based on places, based on clients. So how do you classify based on functions? For example, a department in a government which takes care of people's needs, that is a welfare department, so it is classified based on the function that it is performing. Some factory that is manufacturing cars, that is a function that it is performing. So it is a functional based classification of organizations based on functions. So Peter Drucker said that Fayol used a narrow functional base. We'll see how. Functional organization was designed by Fayol in the early 20th century. Although functionalism is empirically convenient, what this means is it is possible to scientifically prove that functionalism is a good concept. Although functionalism is empirically convenient, it is found to be deficient in design and logic. It takes a single dimension of management to determine all facets of organization structure around it. So it takes one single facet of management of producing something of the function of organization, and everything is built around that single dimension. So it is deficient in design and logic. This is how Peter Drucker criticized the functional base of Henry Fayol. Besides, he says that besides the empirical base used by Fayol for generating a full-fledged theory of management is too narrow. Whatever theory Fayol came up with and whatever functional base he used, that is too narrow a functional base to come up with a full-fledged theory. This is what Peter Drucker says. Fayol proceeded to theorize on functionalism on the basis of functions undertaking in a manufacturing company. What Fayol worked was in a manufacturing company, and Fayol proceeded to theorize. He completed a whole full-fledged theory based on this one manufacturing company. It would be unrealistic to expect that the insights and derivations from the mining firm would be equally applicable to the needs and challenges of other organizations. This is how Peter Drucker says that the functional base, the base of the experiments that the Fayol used for deriving the functional organization, is too narrow. It is very narrow. It is based on just one manufacturing company or one mining firm. Contemporary organizations are definitely larger in size and much more complex. Peter Drucker therefore argues that anything more complex, more dynamic or more entrepreneurial than a typical mining firm of Fayol's time demands performance capacities which the functional principles do not possess. So today's organizations are more complex than Fayol's time, more dynamic than Fayol's times, and they demand performance capacities which Fayol never touched upon. Considering these limitations, functionalism should be used only as one of the several principles and never as the principle in design of organizations that are large in size. So functionalism should only be one of the several principles, and it should never be the principle. It should never be that one only principle which is used in design of organizations which are large in size or complex in nature. This is what Peter Drucker's criticisms are. He said that, first thing he said that it is a mechanistic model which was imposed on living business. Second, he said that 14 principles overlap, and third, he exhaustively criticized the narrow functional base used by Henry Fayol. I hope you have understood Peter Drucker's criticism of Henry Fayol. Moving on, the last criticism, the clash of unity of command principle and coordination principle. To Fayol, the principle of unity of command is of supreme importance. He says that unity of command should be there because an individual cannot take dual command. This is what we have seen in our previous slides. Principle of unity of command is of supreme importance for Fayol. It would be dysfunctional to the organization to strengthen the hierarchy where the sense of unity is less, personal contact is limited, and real differences outlook are desirable. Chief executive would face problems of coordination. What this means is, let's say there is an organization where unity is less, an organization where there is less unity, where personal contact is less, where there are workers who are jealous of each other, so personal contact is less, unity is less. In such an organization, if you strengthen the hierarchy, it would be dysfunctional for that organization. I hope you understand now. It would be dysfunctional to the organization to strengthen the hierarchy where the sense of unity is less, personal contact is limited. In such an organization, the chief executive would face problems of coordination among his employees. So there is a clash among unity of command and coordination. If you apply unity of command too much, coordination would be hampered. If you apply coordination too much, unity of command cannot be achieved. So there is a clash of unity of command and coordination. So we are done with criticisms of Henry Fayol. Now we'll see how Henry Fayol is relevant in today's times, and we'll see how we can defend him in the light of all the criticism that we have seen. So moving on, Fayol's preference for macro level theory building has both Max Weber's and Taylor's ideas. As we have seen, it has similarity with Taylor's ideas, and as we will see in our future sessions, it is also similar to Max Weber's ideas. So in defense, Fayol's preference of macro level theory building has both Max Weber's and Taylor's ideas. We need to evaluate Fayol contextually, in the context of what he has written. Rather than finding shortcomings in his theory, it should be appreciated for laying down some fundamentally strong principles. He laid down some fundamental strong principles. So rather than finding shortcomings in that, we should evaluate him contextually and appreciate him for laying down these principles, because he was the first person to lay down such principles for management. Among the early writers on management, Fayol has the unique distinction of attempting to build a universal science of management applicable to everything. As we have seen, he said that administrative theory is universal, and he applied it to commerce, industry, politics, religion, war, or philanthropy, everything. Fayol did not altogether neglect the human side of organization. He said that there is no limit to the number of principles of organization. He says that every administrative rule or device which strengthens the human part of organization or facilitates its working takes its place among the principles. So whatever principle which strengthens the human part of organization is a part of principles. He said that. Also, another thinker, Bertram Gross, said about Fayol, to Fayol, personnel is the essence of organization. Fayol was also careful to state that his principles not be considered as rigid rules, and he himself said that my rules are not rigid and these are flexible, and this should be adopted according to your needs and according to the time. So criticizing him on the fact that he came up with a dehumanizing and mechanistic theory is wrong, because he himself did not neglect the human side of organizations. Fayol was prepared to revise his earlier views about the place of unity of command within his theory of functionalism. He was able to appreciate the criticism that functionalism posed great difficulties. So as we have seen, Peter Drucker extensively criticized him on his narrow functional ways, and in response to that criticism, Henry Fayol himself said that okay, these criticisms are valid, and he himself recognized those criticisms and he himself recognized their shortcomings. So in defense of Fayol, we can say this. Again, what Fayol gave turned out to be practical prescriptions for efficient organization structures. Whatever he gave was based on practical aspect. We have seen this in the slide of similarity of Taylor and Fayol, that both of them dealt with practical aspects. So whatever prescriptions, whatever norms he laid down, those norms were all practical in nature. They were not just theoretical, they were all practical prescriptions. He developed administration into a science. He gave us 14 principles. So in short, he actually developed administration into a science. He gave the ideas of gangplank and need for administrative training, which are very much valid even in today's times. Even in India, the ideas of gangplank and level jumping are very much valid if you have to avoid delays in an organization, and need for administrative training is also a very valid concept in today's times. Fayol was a pioneer of the concept of viewing management as being made up of functions. As we have seen, he gave us a functional basis of organization classification, so he was a pioneer of viewing management as being made up of functions. He took up a functional base and classified organizations according to those functional bases. He provided a broad and inclusive perspective of management and developed a framework which stimulated subsequent writers on management theory. So whatever subsequent writers on management theory came, they came because Fayol gave up his theory. Fayol gave his theory of 14 principles of management, and that is what Gulick and Irving built upon, that is what Mooney and Riley built upon. So all the subsequent writers of management theory have to thank Henry Fayol for that. This is how Henry Fayol is relevant. And a more important point, Fayol's principles are widely used today in planning and developing company organization structure. Even today, even in India also, Fayol's principles are widely used. Among the most widely used are unity of direction and unity of command. As we already know, functional foremanship concept is no longer used. Taylor's idea of having 8 specialized supervisors is no longer used. Every employee has only one manager, and there is a unity of direction and unity of command in every organization. Even in government administration there is unity of direction and unity of command in today's times. So it is the most widely used concept. Also, authority and responsibility has a high degree of utilization. Even Peter Drucker, who was a severe critic of Fayol, he says that he acknowledges that Fayol's model is still unsurpassed in some respects. He says that Fayol's functional organization is still the best way to structure a small business, especially a small manufacturing business. So even Peter Drucker, who severely criticized Fayol, even he recognized that Fayol's functional organization is still the best way to structure a small business, especially a small manufacturing business, even though functional base was not valid for large and complex organization. As we have seen this in criticism part, he said that this functional base was too narrow for complex and dynamic organizations. It is still the best way to structure a small business. This is what even Peter Drucker says, and this is how Henry Fayol is relevant even today. So we are done with Henry Fayol today. In the next session we'll learn about other classical thinkers, which are Gulick and Urwick. So please subscribe to the channel if you do not want to miss the upcoming session, and also like, comment and share if you like the content. Hope to see you soon in my next session. Peace out.